some chips.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to We Lost Some Chips. I can't remember what episode.
Episode 21.
This is 21?
I think so.
21.
Oh, yeah.
This episode is now of legal age. To totally wow you. I don't know.
To wow you. Yeah.
Anyways.
So Paul and I just had an interesting conversation / argument.
Yeah.
But we came to a resolution.
It's true, relatively quickly. I was commenting, I think that might actually be our first pointed altercation. But
And I said probably not, given how open I am to direct confrontation.
True, although I'm generally so, which is why I think you tend more on like the NT side, on the Myers-Briggs stuff.
Could be.
Because NTs generally are more open to that kind of stuff.
It could be. I think a lot of it has to do with my upbringing too.
Okay.
With my siblings.
Yeah, that's right.
As well as my parents.
Sure. Hey, were you teased a lot as a kid or no?
Not in a way that was damaging to my self-esteem.
Okay.
I mean, I was definitely teased by friends, like I have been. Yeah, I would say no, generally.
Okay.
You know,
I was,
yeah.
To some extent, yeah. And so,
yeah.
I think some of that might come into play too. But at any
By the way,
rate,
we're talking about the effect of siblings.
Yeah, that's
today.
right.
So that's kind of what we saw as a natural tie-in. But
yep, exactly.
But yeah, but also just factors in our upbringing. Well,
yep.
Anyway, and this time we're taking a break from our series on the other Cold War. Just a refresher, that is our series talking about some of the important factors that play into the disengagement between single men and single women in the modern age. Last time we talked a lot about attractiveness.
Yeah.
Its importance and what can be done about it. We had special guests Steph and Tracy. We had some good conversations.
Yeah, it was great. And while our sibling discussion today isn't necessarily about the Cold War, there might be some analogies, like maybe we could call this the trepidatious piece of cord. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with something to describe sibling relationships.
The Treaty of Versailles,
they often
wasn't that
involve
for World War II?
conflict. Yeah, I believe
kind of like that, huh?
I believe so. I mean, they do there's a lot of conflict, but it's not. Anyways, it's
we could probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's Cold War stuff in there too.
Yeah.
Or straight up war stuff, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so to prepare for this, I read a very long, somewhat boring article, and Bryce read 2 fun articles.
And yet, did you find yours boring?
This was what's that?
Did you find yours to be boring?
I actually did enjoy some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not fair for me to say it was boring, but Bryce thought it was boring later.
Well, I would say more people would find it boring than not, including myself.
Well, it was a summary of other people's research. It was literature summary, and I find those useful because it's basically I find them pretty credible. And
that's right. I mean, that's the actual scientific findings being presented, right? So it's a lot more granular. It's certainly not dumbed down. So you're getting more of the full story. Whereas usually when people write about these studies, like in a Time article, whatever, they're given a very summarized point of view that it is missing some of the richness. So.
Yeah, that's true. Or it's just focused on like one aspect kind of intensely and not given as broad of a thing. I don't know. Actually, when I was doing my master's degree, I did a literature review. That was what my master's. I did a thesis-less master's, and so like a
thesis list.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There was no
mine
thesis.
was
I
too.
did. Well, I didn't have to do any of my own research.
Nice.
But I had to do a literature review, which is a summary of other people's research.
Right.
And it had a great title, like most engineering papers. It was called Modeling Stresses in Thin Films Grown by Ion Bombardment. So every once in a while, at different places I lived, I would like just take it out and stick it on the coffee table just to see if Anybody would be like, "Whoa, what the heck is this?"
Yeah.
But I never got any reaction.
Yeah.
Out of it.
Well, one of my friends, he has a PhD in economics, and he was saying that I started reading his dissertation just because I was interested in it. It was about health economics. And he said that, I may have been the first person besides himself to ever started reading it. Even his committee may not have read it. Anyway.
Okay, yeah, I'm pretty convinced most of the people on my committee didn't read mine.
Yeah.
But they just went to the presentation. At any rate, so yeah, we're talking about siblings, and okay, one of the things that we can kind of jump into here is that one of the things. So the thing that I read through was it was a 2012 literature review of a few decades worth of research on siblings in general, different effects that siblings have on us and stuff. And so some of the new research has pointed out that conflict among siblings is in some ways good and in some ways bad. But one of the ways in which conflict is good is that it can develop skills in perspective, emotional intelligence, negotiation, persuasion, problem solving, pro-social behavior, empathy, and academic achievement.
Oh yeah,
that's pretty good.
We exhibited all of those.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah,
well,
it was once I think I've said this before on this podcast. If not, I've definitely talked to Bryce about it. If I can keep arguing with someone for about 5 minutes, I'll usually about partway into it, I'll realize that I'm wrong somewhere, and I can come around to a place of humility, and then I can reluctantly say okay, I'm wrong. But my initial reaction always is to put up a big defense and be push against it. So, anyways,
yeah. Well, I mean, think about conflict, and we'll definitely want to talk more about conflict. This is not the first time I've said that, but on this show, but yeah, it's such a rich and important topic. And the reality is, no one does it perfectly, right? But I mean, I think this is one of the big takeaways from siblings research, is that it shows how much of an influence just having siblings and growing up with siblings can have on your ability to navigate those constructively as an adult.
Yeah. And research basically shows that these skills that basically like what you're saying, the skills that you develop in working out conflicts with your siblings, they extend out to all your other relationships, basically. So, it's good stuff. So maybe it was good I grew up with 7 brothers.
Yeah.
And 1 sister.
And I grew up with 2 brothers and 3 sisters. So, I mean...
Yeah, although, like I was telling Bryce, I would have liked it if I would have grown up with more sisters, because maybe I would understand women a little bit better.
And there is some findings that we might talk about this time that do back that up.
Dang it. Well, if any listeners out there want to be my foster sister, maybe it's not too late. It might be too late. Anyways, okay, well, you got a bunch of siblings. Let me ask you some things, actually. Did your family ever... Did you guys come up with weird nicknames for each other and stuff, or no?
Yeah, I mean, just naturally. You asked me this before, and all I could think of was my mom called me one that was based on my nickname that I don't like, so I don't want to share it on air. But yeah.
Because I feel like this is a sibling specific thing. Well, maybe some parents give nicknames, but my parents didn't ever. Your mom did, though. That was your mom.
Yeah, and now that I think about it, yeah, we all had nicknames for each other.
The siblings made nicknames for the other siblings?
Yeah, I mean, they weren't... I'm not sure where you're going with this, but not
I just think it's an interesting aspect of, rich sibling life.
No.
I think it can be positive.
Yeah.
That... I don't know. I feel like it shows some interesting little... family microculture stuff going on.
Sure. Oh well, there's definitely a lot of that. I think this is one manifestation of that. You're right, of your own family culture. I don't know. I think anytime you have close relationships with people, you can create different shows of affection for them, and one of those is to call them different names. Like you see that in Latin culture a lot, right?
Yeah.
call each other like fat, and it's a term of endearment. Yeah, and other things too. Yeah,
it's actually pretty funny if you translate these things directly into English. Because I thought about this. Because of course, I was a missionary in Argentina, and like you would ask like, do you know where this person lives? And they'd be like, I mean, directly translated from Spanish, it would be like, oh, you mean the fat guy down the street? El Gordo?
Yeah, exactly. And they don't mean it as an insult.
No, it's kind of funny that it doesn't matter to them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess I was thinking about that when I was researching the sibling stuff, because all of our nicknames in my family all were sibling-made nicknames.
Huh.
And they changed over time. And then we had other weird stuff too. Like our family we would use words in ways that they seemed like they were used in ways inside the family in ways that they weren't used in society at large. Like, for example, we started using the word...
They call you murderer at home?
No. What are you talking about?
And then you go out in public and someone actually calls you murderer, and then the police come get you.
No, it's nothing like that at all. But like we made up some words, you know, that were just fake words, and some of them I don't even remember what they meant. We used the word generic as like a real cut down.
Ooh, like not special.
It wasn't like
generic.
It wasn't like a slang word used in the public at large. I don't think I ever heard it anymore. But it was like, because I was watching some old family home videos and we kept saying the word generic. We're like, that's generic, man. And one time we were on a family trip and we were somewhere in Texas, and we came across this. We just randomly saw this hotel called the Generic Hotel, and we all like were rolling laughing.
You're like, that's the worst hotel ever.
Yeah. Anyways.
Okay. Anyway, did we mention how those competencies developed among siblings can extend into our later relationships?
A little bit.
As adults? Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Well, it's true.
It is true. Were you listening 5 minutes ago? Yes, they do. Yeah. Like,
and this isn't a shock to no. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's a shock to no one, right? That like, what happens in our childhoods has huge implications for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. It's true.
Not that it can't be like tweaked and changed later on, but not without a lot of effort. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's correct. Yeah, and even some of this conflict stuff, even though in some ways it's good for us, it helps us develop skills.
Mm-hmm.
There are also some things about conflict that are like, well, you're pointing out, they can be negative and they can affect us throughout our lives too.
Sure.
Where they can be bad for adjustment. I don't know if adjustment is like a psychological term. But it seemed like when they were using this, they were specifically talking about deviance, like school problems, bullying, substance abuse, internalizing symptoms.
Do you know what they meant by that, internalizing symptoms?
I don't. Like, I didn't look that up.
I'm not sure either. So I'm not going to say anything about it.
Yep, me neither. But I definitely know what they mean by deviance.
Every now and then, Bryce exhibits some restraint about opining on things.
Way to be humble.
Thank you. I am pretty darn humble.
Anyways, you had some pretty interesting...
But yeah, I mean, that's interesting, right? Like, stuff that goes on inside the home, again, not surprisingly, it affects what we do outside the home. You know, a child who has a really crappy, contentious relationship with a sibling, you know, might really, be desperate for some other social circle outside the home, which may or may not, it could possibly be, a social circle that's not terribly healthy. You know, they may be skipping school or doing drugs or whatever. Or, there's been a lot of attention put on bullying these days, which is appropriate, right? But, we all know the story, kind of like in The Simpsons of, the Nelson Muntzes of the world. The kid is like, and over the years they kind of got into his like troubled home life.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, no, that's true. There's some of the studies we're talking about that as well. That yeah, some sibling conflict can lead to bullying other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Like, presumably, if you've been bullied, your way of getting your power back in your life is to bully other people.
Yeah, I would and I would say in general, like some of the findings suggest that like older siblings of the same gender as you, you tend to model your behavior after them,
right,
for good or ill.
Right.
Generally.
That was huge with me and my oldest brother. So I have 2 older brothers and 1 older sister, and then 2 younger sisters. And like, I don't want to incriminate any of my siblings. I love them all; they're wonderful. But well,
don't throw
kids are not always the best. Yeah, like apparently one of my brothers would really pick on me a lot, but I idolized him so much that like I was a glutton for punishment, and I would keep coming back to him because he just did all these cool things. He was interested in all these cool things, and Indiana Jones and Transformers and Constructs. I don't know if you remember those. And he'd like draw these cool comics and stuff. And he also, I don't want to get too much into it. I wouldn't say it scarred me, but at the same time, my other brother and my parents to some extent were kind of concerned that I was so enamored with this brother that I would follow him over a cliff.
I think it's a valid concern. I mean, wasn't some of the stuff that you were reading talking about making the argument that siblings have a greater impact on your life even than parents? Parental influence, or was that not what it was saying?
That's not what it was saying. But it is true that like our parents and our siblings, those do. I mean, I do think they said that somewhere.
I know some of the stuff that I read talked about like drug use, whether you choose to abuse drugs or not, you're more affected by your siblings than you are by your parents.
Yeah. So
yeah.
that old PSA, who taught you how to do this? It was you, Dad. I learned it from watching you.
I learned from watching my oldest sibling, Johnny. That's what
yeah. That was not accurate.
But
I love on YouTube, someone commented on that video that it was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Because it's the big twist. It's that the dad taught him how to use it from his example.
Yeah,
anyway, sorry.
Nobody saw that coming.
Yeah.
That's right. For some reason, in my childhood mind, I thought it was just cigarettes, but it was some kind of illegal drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I found the same thing about like risky sexual behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. Like you tend to be more closely to model that after your older siblings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I don't know. I mean, yeah, they are your role models. I mean, there's some. One of the things I read said that whether or not you do drugs, your older siblings may have as high of an impact on that as your peers. But definitely it's your peers and your friends like highest, and then your parents.
Yeah, interesting.
And your younger siblings, you're like whatever. Maybe not quite like that.
Well, probably right. They're
much,
kind of irrelevant to you. You're like, I'm not looking to them for cues.
I've sometimes had this this theory that it's all siblings younger than you or family members younger than you whose names you get mixed up. You know how parents will like say like 5 names before they get yours right?
I got that all the time.
And I never do that with my older brothers, but occasionally have done it with my youngest too. But at any rate,
because the spotlight was not on them.
Sure. I don't think you're irrelevant, younger brothers. You're great.
I just can't remember who you are. Yeah. So there's an article in Time I was reading as well. Yeah. It was called The New Science of Siblings. Anyway, they were saying that it's true, like we'll tend to model our own behavior on some of our older siblings' behaviors, but there's also the possibility of the opposite effect, that you'll de-identify, that you'll do the opposite of what they do. If your older brother is the troubled one who likes to skip school and whatever and bully people, then you'll be like, hey, that's not my thing. I'm going to be totally the opposite. I'm going to be the really straight-laced, follow the rules person in the family. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I read some stuff like that as well in this summary that I was reading, which talked about basically. I mean, the takeaway to some extent was siblings directly influence us in certain ways. And in some ways, that makes us more like them. In some ways, it makes us more distinct.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that I think can I wonder if it depends, for example, on how your parents talk about like your older siblings and stuff. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know, like sometimes I wonder if you're aware of your older siblings' negative decisions and it's talked about openly in a kind of a positive, instructive way, whether that might more likely help you to see like, well, this is what their life is like and maybe I want to model my life differently. I don't know. I wondered about that. I know one of the things I read was that when the oldest daughter has a teenage pregnancy, there's a higher
teenage pregnancy.
Uh-huh. There's like a higher risk for the mother to feel like to kind of give up on the younger daughters and
really,
and then they're at a higher risk for teenage pregnancy.
Really,
not only because the older daughter modeled that behavior, but also because the mother, it's more difficult for the mother, and she might not be as much in teaching mode, might just kind of give up a little bit.
Interesting.
Which is the sibling then, which is interesting because then that's the sibling behavior directly influencing the parental behavior, and that in turn influencing other siblings.
Yeah, interesting.
I mean, some of the stuff I read too some of that was actually talking about like indirect influence, right? The sibling influencing you indirectly because it's influencing what your parent does.
Right.
There is, like I know some of the stuff was saying that older siblings do tend to be kind of guinea pigs.
Yeah.
And parents do change their parental strategies over time. Yeah. They become more warm, towards younger siblings.
Yeah, and more permissive too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Yeah, and a lot of the research that's been done on siblings has to do with birth order, I think, or that's some of the oldest. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they often find that to be true. That the first one or two children in a family will get so much attention, and so all these hopes and dreams are foisted on them, and and they're kind of tend to be forced into a de facto leadership role among the siblings.
Yeah,
and then the middle children like me, and I think like you.
Right? I consider myself a middle child.
We're kind of like lost in the mix because the parents are getting tired, and raising kids is hard. And then the youngest is like, forget it, just do whatever you want. Your siblings will take care of you.
Exactly. Which is kind of interesting. Some of that did happen in my family. That's interesting stuff. What was some of the other stuff that you were reading in?
So in that Time article, they talked about the effect of having opposite gender siblings. They basically found that that can accentuate some of the differences between siblings, and that as they get older, those who have opposite gender siblings have some marked advantages socially. For instance, in one study, they found that guys who had an older sister had improved conversation ability. They were more involving in their conversations with women, and they were more liked. And then similarly, girls who had older brothers were more friendly and were more pleasant and more smiley in their conversations with men. So interesting. Yeah.
You had several older sisters.
I had one older.
Oh, just one?
And two younger. And I would say, like, to me, it's very clear, like, the positive influence my sisters have had on me. I mean, all my siblings have, on balance, been very positive influences in my life. But no, I think socially I was helped a lot by my sisters in that regard. In subtle ways, like, it's not that they were like sitting me down and saying, "Okay, Bryce, time to learn you some things."
Lesson 1, conversation.
Right. But yeah, I mean, for instance, like I went to visit some family for Christmas, and it was just such a nice reminder. Like, I mean, my sisters were all very delightful and intelligent and kind and fun people, and it was just a good reminder. Or it was good to have that influence in my life again, because otherwise I'm a sad, lonely bachelor with a cold Grinch heart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do have an older sister, but I also had a whole bunch of male siblings. I've had several times in conversation in like family gatherings, either a sister-in-law or my mom has like stopped us in the middle of some conversation where all those guys are talking about something super nerdy and scientific. Mm-hmm. They say like, "Can we talk about something else?" So I've had that happen several times.
Yeah.
And maybe if I would have had more sisters, I would have gotten more used to talking about other things.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't really know. Yeah, those are good points. My sister was like, she was like my babysitter. She was like that age, several years older than me. She tried to teach me piano, but gave up. But I did have a good relationship with her. I do, she doesn't live in state, and so I don't see her super often, but I feel like we have a good friendship. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's good stuff.
Nice.
Anyways, like some of the stuff interestingly, for some reason, there hasn't been as much research about sibling relationships as there has been for other relationships. Like, there's these authors looked at a couple decades worth of journal articles, and they found that there were like 700 citations that talked about sibling relationships as compared to like 33,000 for parent-child relationships, 8,000 for marital relationships, 5,000 for peer-friend relationships. And even those 700 that hit on kind of like some key terms, they didn't all directly focus on siblings. So they were kind of saying, and this was back in 2012, but they were kind of pointing out that there's been a little bit of a vacuum there.
Yeah.
And needs to be more research on this kind of stuff. And
I remember reading that there's a lot of reasons, or several reasons for that it's kind of harder to study these things. The deeper you get into family dynamics, the harder it is to recognize and control for the different factors that you need to be able to do valid, scientific research. Often you're going to want to do longitudinal, long-term research, and that's very expensive. And they probably, I also remember that they thought that just investigating the oldest child was enough to learn about, how children develop, and then they find it wasn't until later they realized, actually we need to look at all of the siblings, or not just the oldest one.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, they were kind of making a call for like, here's some areas where we think, people could do more research and should. And this is a summary of what's happened in the past and stuff. But they made at one point that I thought was interesting is that this is back in 2010. There were more youth living with a sibling than with a father.
Yeah, that was amazing.
I mean, it wasn't by a huge
amount. Not in a great way either.
It was like, I know 82% of youth were living, that's 18 and under, or probably 17 and under, I guess, were living with a sibling, and only 78% of youth were living with a father.
Yeah.
It's back in 2010. Of course, we talked, I don't remember if we talked about this in our episode about fathers. I think we did a little bit, but there's, fathers have over time kind of been like less involved,
Yeah.
Life. They've been kind of like missing a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if your siblings affect your development more, if that becomes more pronounced as there are fewer fathers involved. Then your siblings probably take on more of that role, particularly older siblings.
I imagine so. In fact, one of our roommates was, we don't want to, he made kind of that same point, that he'd been kind of pushed into that position.
Oh, really?
And anyway, I don't want to.
I didn't hear that.
Try not to incriminate the innocent.
Way to go.
Yeah.
Roommate
whoever you are.
Roommate 3, or whatever. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, some of the stuff that I was reading was talking about what you were talking about all this old research about birth order and the firstborn being more, for whatever reason. And they were trying, back in the days, this is like back in the 50s and 60s, hypothesizing that maybe because firstborns had more rights and responsibilities under the law. And or because parents tended to overindulge younger siblings, that firstborns ended up being kind of more responsible. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's, of course, these things are just like averaged out over like a whole bunch of people, right? Every individual family is different, but anyways.
Well, I still think you're going to see some overarching trends.
Yeah. I'm sure you will.
Yeah. Paul, what are you going to talk about next?
Well,
are you going to talk about how siblings directly affect our development?
I think we should.
By being social partners,
Go for
role
it.
models, foils. I don't know what they mean by that.
Foils.
I guess that's like your opposite. I don't know.
I think it's like someone to contrast yourself with.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
Okay, and indirectly by impacting of the family dynamics, such as holding a favored family niche, diluting family resources, or serving as building blocks of the family structure. I think this stuff is fascinating, just the whole family dynamics thing.
Yeah.
In large part because I've been examining my own family dynamics a lot, and have been kind of vocal about it among my siblings with mixed to negative results.
Oh, really? I know I did hear one of these conversations from the sidelines.
But I mean, it's fascinating, and I think it's very it's a reality. Like our family dynamics, they shape who we grow up to become, in good and bad ways.
Yeah, they do. Well, this whole limited resources thing, though, I know that thing. There's other stuff that contrasts with that now, which back in the day is what they would say is that, well, the more kids you have, the more limited resources you have. And so, it was kind of like, I don't know if it was that every additional kid is like maybe less likely to have a good education or have as good of a job. I mean, to some extent, they were measuring the stuff after the fact based off of like your career stuff later, it seemed like. But I know they were also saying that your family dynamic also depends a lot on I'm trying to remember what it was. They were talking about like the age gaps between siblings and whether or not the siblings played any kind of like role of like teaching one another things, and if so, that seemed to like counteract some of that.
Yeah, that can. I mean, one of the big, so another source we referred to is there was an interview on NPR with Jeffrey Kluger, who I believe is an editor for the New York Times, I think, and he also wrote a book called The Sibling Effect. What's it called? What the bonds what the bonds among brothers and sisters reveal about us. And they also talked about this in the Time article, but just like, yes, there's long-term advantages to having siblings, but certainly as you're growing up, it also means you're going to have a lot more conflict. Sometimes, I think the statistic was for kids like, I think 4 to 7, it was like 3.5 times an hour. It would have some sort of conflict. And I will say, harkening back to my Christmas, that was an accurate statistic among one of my sister's kids. Yeah.
That was for a certain age group? Or?
Yeah, I think it was like 4 to 7, I think. But there's just so much more potential for conflict. But kind of contrary to your point, so Kluger was saying that actually you don't want to be a parent who just says, they'll figure it out. On the one hand, you can't intervene every time, but on the other, you have a real opportunity to help teach and model some like more sophisticated conflict resolution skills. Because usually kids, if they're not, it's force. It's force, and that's usually how they'll solve conflicts, right? Is through force. They're stealing the toy from the other kid, and then the other kid will get angry, start crying, and start hitting them to get the toy back. And again, very common. But in fact, again, not that also during my Christmas, there was a conflict that kept. We were all driving around in the same car. And sister, I will not mention any names, if you're listening. Basically, two of their kids had this irreconcilable difference that was keeping them from agreeing on who would be sitting where in the car. And we were not going to leave with that issue unresolved. And we tried to, persuade them to find a compromise, because again, their natural state was like, no, I want it this way, and the others, no, I want it this way, and there's no meeting in the middle. And we tried to, to persuade, to incentivize, to cajole. Eventually, I offered this nephew. I offered to play a computer game with him, one that we'd been enjoying together. If he would, just let it go and sit. Let the other sibling, have her way, or sit where she wanted to sit. Anyway, what was I getting at?
Oh, well, you were talking about conflict resolution and stuff.
if not for us adults, intervening a little bit, not settling it by force, which is a tempting way to do it, right? I'm gonna come in here and that's it. Who had the toy first? You. Okay, you get it. To look for something a little more sophisticated, a little less about force, more civilized. Because usually kids aren't going to find that on their own.
Yeah, no, I think if left to their own devices is where you get more of this negative long-term effects of sibling conflict.
Right.
And whereas when you have a parent mediator, the wise invisible hand, not invisible, the visible hand.
Well, it kind of does. I mean, in a way, yeah, right? The invisible hand in economics, that concept is that people motivated by their own self-interest will somehow come to mutually agreeable exchanges without any external compulsion. That's where you want siblings to get to, right? They're not
right. That's the long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Right, like your comment about 3 conflicts per hour.
Yeah.
As a child of a certain age, but then hopefully by the time you're 20 or 30, you get that way low.
Yeah, hopefully.
I don't know. Although not always. I noticed too, though, when I go back for family gatherings and stuff, that man, I've got to be on guard because, I don't, I'm different than some of my siblings, pretty markedly in some ways, and I have to be careful to not do things that will almost certainly lead to conflict. Yeah. And they do too, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure I'm not the easiest guy to get along with all the time. Yeah. But 90% of the time I am. Except 10% of the time was today. Earlier, an hour ago.
No, Paul was a very agreeable person to disagree with.
After 5 minutes of being very disagreeable, then I was agreeable.
No, well, it was never vitriolic.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't. I mean, I was about to pull out the vitriol, but just kidding. I keep some in my room just in case. I actually know what vitriol is. I'm guessing it's something flammable.
Well, vitriol. I don't think it's an actual substance.
Well, it's got to be. No. Okay. I assumed it must have been.
Anyway, I was gonna say something else. Okay. Kluger. I think it was Kluger mentioned this statistic that into adulthood. Like most statistics, this one is probably made up. I'd have to go open up that article. But it says something like 15% of adult sibling relationships are irreparably toxic, but that the rest are either repairable or pretty positive.
Okay.
So that's a little bit rare.
Good.
Yeah, and he also talked about how certain focusing events, especially parents, getting sick or passing away, can really be the impetus for siblings to kind of bury the hatchet.
Yeah.
and certainly, if not bury the hatchet, then to draw closer, if they were already close. And that's certainly been the case. My mom passed away a few years ago, and that's certainly been the case that it's given us, in some ways, it's made us more distant without our mom, being the liaison between us, and phone call talker. But in other ways, it's kind of incentivized us to try harder to stay close.
Yeah, that's great, man. I know that, in my extended family, I know there's some examples of people who haven't talked with either a sibling or a parent for like years. Yeah. And that kind of thing is scary to me. Like, I have not had that with any of my family members. I know, like, if I map myself with all my siblings, like, I dislike conflict enough to where I will almost always try to bring something back around to a resolution, like the same day, if at all possible. Usually within just a few hours, if at most.
Well, that'll help you in marriage.
So, yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
There are different styles, though. Like I've talked about before. Like, I have one brother who, when there's conflict, he needs to get away from the immediacy of the conflict.
Sure.
And needs to go, like, take a break and be by himself.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was reading here, I was talking about. Yeah, I think you read this earlier, but something about let's see. Conflicts with siblings can develop skills and it lists all these things, and one of them is persuasion. And I found that, like, for example, one of my brothers, I would always want to borrow his clothes, and I would do this. I would have to time it right. I'd go and ask him. I'd be like, "Hey, man, can I borrow this?" And he'd be like, "What?
What?
And, like,
what? Okay."
And we were very different personalities in that sense. Like, if somebody would ask me to borrow, like, my laptop or something, I would usually be like, "Yeah, go ahead." I didn't care as much, but for him it was important to, like, have his stuff be taken care of. So anyways, I'd ask him, like, half an hour ahead of time, be like, and then he, like, wouldn't agree to it. He'd be like, "Well, I don't know." And then he'd, like, go away for a while. And then after, like, 20 minutes after having thought about it, then he would, like, feel guilty enough to just come and be like, "All right, go ahead." And he would give it to me. And so it was, that wasn't really persuasion. In fact, I guess that was more manipulation. But hey, maybe it was negotiation.
Yeah. Well, just think of how bad you guys would be at it if you didn't have each other. Yeah, because
I learned how to deal with that, though. I mean, it would have been worse to be like,
right.
"What? You want me to borrow it? Well, that's just wrong." And
right.
Instead, I just would say, like, "Okay," and then just wait half an hour.
Yeah, I mean, so Kluger, he says that I think we kind of talked about this earlier. One of the most profound effects that siblings have on each other is helping develop conflict resolution skills and relationship formation and maintenance ability.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I think you get some of that even from, like, roommates and stuff like that, like learning how to live with people, but not as intensely.
I agree,
but to some extent.
The groundwork is laid at an early age. And not that can't be altered over time. Also, this is interesting. He made an interesting point that, really, at the end of the day, our sibling relationships tend to be our longest relationships throughout life. Our parents
good point.
leave us all too soon.
Tracks. Yeah.
Our friends, they come in later in life. Our spouses and our kids, relatively later. So it's really our siblings who can be some of our, longest term allies. And, if, as we get older, spouses die, it's often our siblings who are still around. So
interesting.
So take care of each other, guys.
Our allies or our foils.
Yes. Yeah. And so here's another point they made that was interesting, that, we're talking a lot about the benefits of having siblings, but there's also, for sure, benefits to being an only child. Although I'm really grateful I had siblings. I would hate to be an only child. But it's true that, you're not doomed if you're an only child. Like, you still have peers, you still have friends, and you definitely have more parental attention.
That's a good point. Yeah. There's definitely no resource depletion.
Yeah. Yeah. They find that only children tend to have more sophisticated grasp of current events. They tend to have a better vocabulary. They tend to have more sophisticated sense of humor as well.
Whoa. Interesting.
Yeah. Interesting.
That is interesting stuff. My mom was kind of an only child. I mean, she had an older sister. I can't remember how many years older.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a few years older, though. Like maybe like 12 or something. And although she found out when she was like 30 or so that she was not her actual sister.
What?
Yeah, she didn't know that whole time. And that was like this big reveal, you know.
Wow. M. Night Shyamalan.
M. Night Shyamalan wrote my mom's life story.
Yeah. He was her father.
Yeah, no, it was interesting stuff. But I mean, but my mom said that she always wanted to have a big family when she got married because she, for a lot of her life, she didn't have a sibling around because her older sister grew up and went to college, and then she was alone, and then you know she was kind of lonely. So
yeah.
But she does have a good vocabulary and a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't know the actual stats on this, but they found it. I'm sure a statistically significant difference. Was it a big difference? I don't know.
Well, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not.
And then I think the other stat said that the seventh child of the only child has the best sense of humor of all, and that's me.
Oh, that is definitely a made-up stat.
Is it?
Yeah. So another thing that I thought was interesting, they talked a lot about like blended families as well, right? Where there's step parents and step siblings.
Yeah.
They found that basically that can there's not necessarily a huge difference with biological siblings or step siblings in and of itself. Like certainly like integrating into this new family can be a challenge, but certainly like step siblings can fill a lot of these similar roles that you'd see with regular siblings. But they also said that that's probably that the it's least disruptive to a child up until about the age of 12, and then beyond that it could be a little challenging. So
really?
I don't know.
Like if you're older 12 and then all of a sudden some new kid comes into the picture.
Yeah. That's gonna be more
you're like,
likely.
look, bucko.
Yeah.
Let me tell you how things are gonna go around.
That's
here.
right. This is my house.
This is my family.
Yeah.
My house.
Yeah.
You're an outsider, and you're redheaded.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. So back in 2010, more than 10% of households included a step or an adoptive child. So, yeah, it's a big chunk of kids in the United States. They're growing up.
Not as many as I'd expect, though, actually.
Oh, really?
Only 10%?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I didn't really know what to expect.
Yeah. I don't know, just because of how many divorces there are. But
that's a good point.
But that doesn't mean you're always going to get remarried, and doesn't mean you're always going to get remarried to someone with kids.
Well, and
well, you also have kids.
You may not have, if the marriage is clearly going down a bad direction soon enough, you might not have kids to begin with in the first marriage.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. Also, your number of siblings by racial group back in 2010 anyways. So
let's not talk about this because we don't understand it.
Well, we can just give qualitative is that
no, we don't even know what this means.
No, we just know it means it goes in this order. Like Asian, white, African American, Hispanic, in terms of least siblings to most siblings.
Oh, okay. We'll say it that way.
Can say that.
They did give us some numbers, but we're
not sure if what they're saying.
Not sure they're...
Well, we weren't sure if what they're saying by the numbers is this is how many siblings you have, or this is how many average total kids
in the
total
family of those races.
So, anyway,
Asians have the fewest siblings. Hispanics have the most.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So. Anyways, yeah, I think that's all I got, man.
Yeah, anything else
you got
we
anything
need to
else?
say?
I don't think so. I mean, I think siblings are interesting. I definitely feel like I can see how I was shaped in a lot of ways by my siblings. Particularly like I think to myself like, I mean, my mom was around a lot. My dad worked a lot, to support. My dad never went to college, and he was supporting 9 kids with his sole income for a long time. And he worked a lot, and so didn't, never made like a huge amount of money. And so I think I probably spent like a lot of time around my siblings compared with how much time I spent with my dad one-on-one,
Yeah.
And so I can see how they probably had a really big impact on my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, siblings, yeah.
They're important.
They're important.
They're good.
Uh-huh.
If you don't want to be lonely in your old age, make peace with your siblings.
Yep.
That's my word of advice.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And if you're a parent, I guess. No, never mind. I'm not gonna
intervene every now and then.
Yeah, sure. And it's okay. Like your kids are probably learning good things from their conflict over time.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, there's some sage advice from people with no kids.
That's right.
But who read a lot of science.
That's right. Boy, we know so much about this stuff.
Yeah. Theoretically, we do.
All right. Well, it's been great talking with you all.
Right.
And I guess next time we'll be talking about something else.
Oh, yes. I was about to say, we don't know what we're going to talk about.
We'll probably have a guest on.
Yeah, probably.
But, okay. Yeah. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay,
Take care. Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcasting app and give us a rating. Thank you.